pjnet.tv. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Time in our live studio. If you're watching this and it's not 9 o'clock Eastern Time on Monday, the 28th of September, you're watching a recorded version of it. Regardless, we are so glad that you have tuned in, and you will not be disappointed. We have a great guest, in fact, two of them lined up tonight. One of them is in our green room now. We got the recording turned on. We are streaming to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, starting a countdown to Studio 37 Alpha. Well, good evening and welcome to Studio 37 here at pjnet.tv. I'm your host, Coach Prasic. We're going to have us a nice fireside chat tonight, if that's okay with you. And a special shout out to Ben Cooper, who was in our chat room. Oh, by the way, are you watching this on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter? If you are, we're so grateful. But there is a fellowship going on right now at pjnet.tv. If you take your browser over there, the first button says video and chat. You can make new friends and sign up for, it's the sweetest fellowship on the internet. No kidding. Ben Cooper made the arrangements for our guest, and it's a little bit different tonight because our guest, as you will find, is doing some ministry work in areas of the world where, well, let's just say it's not popular. Let's just leave it at that. I'll let her share more. But many of her books are on display. There is one right there. There. 1, 2, 3. Walk in step with me, says Jesus. And Dare, Mighty Warrior, of course, above the fireplace. But our guest tonight is Mikaela Vincent is her pen name, and she comes to us by way of audio only. And Mikaela, did you forget to put on your lipstick or something and didn't want to go on camera?
Well, that is an advantage.
There's a reason you're not on camera, though, right?
Yes. We have been serving in a closed country, which means a country where missionaries are not allowed and where Christians are persecuted. And the particular area where we have been serving, most of the people there have never heard of Christ. And so we had a lot of very pioneer work to do for many years there. But it was quite the adventure. We knew that we were being watched constantly, and that one day it would happen that we would probably either be arrested or have to leave or something. And that day came last year. So we actually got a tip from somebody who knew that we were next in line for the police to come after us. So we left the country really fast, grabbed everything that we could carry in our hands, and left after 30 years of working in that country.
30 years.
So,
Mikaela, let me just clarify. You said where many people have not heard of Jesus. Now, do you mean by that they know of him, they know kind of about him, it's sort of or did they literally not know? When you say Jesus or Jesus Christ, they literally did not know who you were talking about? I mean, if I said Genghis Khan, they'd know that. Alexander the Great, they didn't know Jesus Christ at all?
No, they actually don't even know God's name. So we had to start from the very beginning and teach them about who God is, and then teach about who Jesus is. So we actually would story all the way through from Genesis, from God creating the world, and we would story through in about 20 minutes to get to the gospel of why Jesus came. But it was quite exciting, really, because when you do it that way, it all makes sense why Jesus had to come. Whereas I think sometimes when we grow up in the church, sometimes we miss a lot of the depth of the gospel and why Jesus had to die.
Now, so they don't even know about Jesus. Do they know about Alexander the Great? Do they know about Genghis Khan? Do they know about other historical figures, or is the truth just something that is suppressed?
Well, actually, we were working with an unreached people group that was pretty isolated. And so I would say probably a lot of them know they didn't know all those stories, but some of them probably were able to get some good education somewhere. But yeah.
Now, and I know you can't give us a lot of detail, but I studied sociology, and one of the things, even in that liberal, you know, discipline, sociologists know that all cultures worship something or somebody. There's a need inside of us to worship. So if these people had never heard of Jesus Christ, what sort of system of folkways, mores, normal behavior, what governed their day to day interactions and behaviors?
Most of the people worship spirits. And so we had to experience a lot of spiritual warfare where we lived. So it was very interesting. But the interesting thing is that they already know about the spiritual realm. And so when we start talking to them about a God who is stronger than the demons and a God who is a God of love, that is very strange to them because they have never experienced demons who love them,
Hmm.
obviously. And they're usually just trying to hurry really fast to appease demons before
Hmm.
they do something ugly to
Right.
them. And so they live in a lot of fear. And so to find out that this God that created the world actually loves them is quite amazing. It's very good news to them. And so at first, because the area where we went to speak to people about Jesus, because they had been blocked off for so long from the gospel, there were many, many walls up spiritually, and it was very difficult to share the good news. So we actually got a lot of prayer going, and after many people prayed, a lot of things started to change, and people's hearts became a lot softer. And after that, there came a season where pretty much every time we told the story about Jesus, they would listen, and usually people would come to Christ. So there, toward the end of our time there, a couple hundred people came to Christ, which was really exciting. But then we had to leave. So I guess it's all in God's hands.
You may get asked this question often. Why did you pick such a hard path?
It's really interesting, but the area of the world where I grew up, I actually was a TCK, and I grew up overseas as a missionary kid. And the area of the world where I grew up, um, a lot of people knew about Jesus. Probably just about everyone had heard his name. And so, but I could speak that language because I grew up there. And so we just kind of assumed that we were going to go there. And you're talking about 30 years ago. And so there wasn't really work going on in the closed countries. So pretty much if you want to share Jesus, you go someplace where you can share Jesus. And so it was really interesting because um, we had to get experience in pastoring a church before we went overseas. And the church that opened up to us was an international church. But it was very interesting because this was in the United States, and about 80% of the people who came to our church were from closed countries, and they had never heard of Jesus before, had never seen a Bible before, and this was in the United States. And so it was very interesting. But every weekend we were meeting new people who would come show up at our church because their friends would all say, you need to go to that church. You need to, learn about Jesus, because they all wanted to know why it was forbidden in their countries to hear about Jesus. And so they would all show up at our church. And so we were sharing Christ with people for the first time that they'd ever heard it. Every weekend. And so after a while, it was like, oh my goodness, we can't go where we were thinking to go. We've got to go where no one's going to hear unless we go. And so that's really how God grabbed our hearts, was we realized that we needed to go where no one else was going and where people wouldn't know. And so the Lord narrowed down where he wanted to send us. And we just left and went there, raised our family there, and it was quite the adventure. And I find that, a lot of people are really afraid to do something like that, but we found that the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. So if he is sending you out there, then he's going before you and he is with you. And the closer you walk to him, the more powerful he will work through you, and you will see all kinds of miracles that you never imagined you would ever see. So we experienced some pretty amazing things while we were overseas, and I'm so grateful for those many years. And my kids had an amazing life growing up over there too.
You say the safest place is in the center of God's will, and my thoughts drifted to Jonah, who didn't want to go somewhere, and that didn't work out so well for him, and so maybe it'd be better. Question: you're talking to people who have literally not heard. I'm trying to get my head around this conversation you're having with someone who, when you say Jesus Christ, they say, who's that? Okay. And then you show them a Bible maybe, and you say, believe it, this is the best-selling book worldwide ever. No other book has sold more than this one, but you don't know anything about it. Do they believe you? I mean,
Well, it's a little difficult because there is no Bible in the language of the people that God sent us to. So we did do some Bible translation, but I can share this story with you that will kind of give a picture. I was hiking through the mountains, had been up to some villages that hadn't heard of Jesus before, and we were hiking back out, and this young woman came and walked alongside me. And so I asked her, I said, do you know who created these mountains, and who created the earth, and who created you? And she said, no, the mountains have just always been there. And so I began to share with her about God who loves her, and how he created the world, and he created her because he loves her. And she just got really quiet, and she said, well, I think maybe my village may not be very important. And I said, well, why is that? And she said, because we've never heard this good news before. And And so I said, well, no, you don't understand. It's because God loves you and you are important is why he had you meet me today, because he wants you to know him. And she said, well, if there's a God who loves me like that, then I want to know him too. And I want to love him back. So
Makes some
it's
of the hard
really,
times seem more worthwhile when you got to be.
yes, yes. And it was quite an adventure because many times we would head out across the mountains and not know where we were going. We were just going that way because we felt God leading us that way. And I remember one time just hiking over the mountains for many, many hours. And we got to this little village in the middle of nowhere. And it was at dusk. And so, if we were going to hike back out, we'd be hiking out in the dark. And so, which is really dangerous in the mountains. And
Mhm.
so, normally, someone would usually take us in, but no one took us in that village that time. But there was this little old lady, and we sat down and talked with her, and she came to Christ. It was her first time to ever hear the gospel, and she came to Christ. And she didn't have much time left to live. She was very elderly. And as we hiked out in the dark and walking through fields at midnight with no moon, which was very difficult on the side of a mountain where you're afraid you're going to fall off if you take the wrong step. And for many, many hours, many miles. And as we walked back, we realized that God had taken us all the way to that little village in the middle of nowhere because he loved that woman and he wanted to pull her up into heaven. And it just goes beyond my understanding the way that God pursues people who don't know him. And his heart is just so big and so open for the lost.
I want to talk.
And
Go ahead.
I chose this picture for the frame there of the prayer wall. It's because I wanted to share that the Lord asked us to open up a prayer wall a year ago because of all the craziness that the world is going through right now, so that we can pray for the things of God's heart and for the nations that are still without Christ. And those are a couple of little kids in Pakistan there in the picture. No, excuse me, in Palestine there in the picture. And we're praying for the nations, and we're also praying for the United States. And we pray through the tragedies that happen, and we've been praying for Afghanistan there. And it's just a place for Christians to gather together from all over the world and pray for the things of God's heart. We don't deal with politics there. We just deal with the eternal things and praying for the things that really matter. The politics come and go here on this earth, and but we want to see lives transformed, including our own hearts. And so also the books that God has asked me to write are specifically for removing the barriers to oneness with Christ, so that we can walk in the fullness of what we were created for and walk also in oneness with others around us.
And Mikaela, you have written many books. Folks, in case you couldn't read the fine print on the screen, I put it up there, morethanAconquerorbooks.com. If I tried to put all the books that Mikaela has published in our studio, well, our studio is just not big enough. Yeah, they would be the size of a postage stamp on the wall. And Mikaela, before we leave you, 30 years you invested, pretty much your life work. and you had to make a hasty exit. Any regrets?
Yes. I'm sorry. What was the question?
Any regrets? You spent 30 years.
Oh, any regrets? No, none at all. I mean, just it really is a grand adventure to walk in obedience to the Lord, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And we're in a place right now where we have no idea what we're going to do next. We don't know where He's going to lead us next. He has not given us any freedom to go out and get a job and settle down in the States. So we don't know. But it's a grand adventure.
It is.
And it's wonderful walking close to Christ.
Mikaela, it is so wonderful to have you share. Folks, I hope that you will go to morethanAconquerorbooks.com and find out more. You can't get 30 years of ministry and missionary experience in 20 minutes, but thank you for sharing your story with us, Mikaela, and thank you again, Ben, for making the arrangements to have Mikaela appear with us tonight. God bless you, Mikaela. We thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, thank you. Well, folks, there you see, it's not high atop. That is the lateral view of the Eagle's Nest, the broadcast facilities from which this program originates. It's actually just a piece of plywood on two sawhorses. Honestly, it really is. Folks, what a powerful story we've just heard from Mikaela Vincent. But don't touch that dial, because in just a few moments at the bottom of the hour, we have another first-time guest coming to share her story, who has a friend who will be coming later next month to share her. She has friends, and she would like you to be her friend too. So hey, listen to her story. That comes up at the bottom of the hour. I've got to make a few changes to get everything ready, do a little housekeeping and things like that. Before I leave, I'll be back. But before I leave, a couple of questions I would like you to ponder and answer them to yourself, but answer them honestly. What is the boldest thing that you've ever done for Jesus Christ? You just heard some pretty bold stuff, didn't you? You say, I couldn't do that. Okay. Second question is, how long ago was it? And the challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.